It's always a treat to be here. You who don't know who I am, my name is Tyler Jackson. I come from Oklahoma now. I used to be in Texas, but got a job working as a curator for the American Banjo Museum. So it's where I spend most of my time getting to hang around cool instruments. I also do a lot of the repair and restoration work as well on all those. So today I thought, the title, I always kind of do a title that covers a broad spectrum so we can go in multiple directions. But just basically wherever level you're at right now in your playing, there's always some helpful tips, tricks, things you can do to help get up to the next level. A lot of what I preach is consistent right hand technique that I've kind of developed over the years. That's really helpful, especially with intricate right hand strokes that you find mainly on tenor banjo, but I take a lot of those and put them onto the tenor guitar. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of dive into a couple of those. Also, just good left hand technique. It's all kind of my philosophy on it. I'm not saying you have to copy me, but it is what I find left hand wise is most efficient to get not only a good tone out of the instrument, but also long term you won't run into as many hand injuries. That's another reason good technique is good, because it should help you with your sound, your playability, but also should be better on your anatomy. You won't get tendonitis, you won't get carpal tunnel and all that kind of stuff if you're making these changes. Some people might say, well, at my age, I don't want to make any radical changes. That's fine. I understand that too. But you never know. I've taught everybody from 4-year-olds to 90-year-olds actually, and all of them have been able to change stuff no matter what age they were at. So, first thing we're going to talk about is the way, and a lot of this is real technical. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly so I have a lot of time to just have a lot of questions and stuff. But I always like to start out with the way I hold the pick. That's a real simple thing, but there's a lot of different ways to hold this little piece of plastic. So I'll kind of tell you what I do and why I do it. When I was a kid, I was kind of known as a child, I guess you'd say prodigy tenor banjo player, which it's kind of an oxymoron, but I got pretty good pretty fast and was basically self-taught. We had a teacher, me and my sister had a teacher who taught us the basics, but we, as far as learning technique and stuff, he didn't really care. He just wanted us to have fun and learn some chords and just enjoy it, which I think, by the way, is a great way to teach when you're teaching a young kid. I didn't know it at the time, but the fact that he wasn't focusing super hard on all this technical stuff made me feel confident, relaxed, that I didn't have to learn all this theory and learn how to read immediately, So that's an approach I try to take with a lot of my students too. All that being said, at some point I got to a certain level where my right hand technique was causing me to hit a ceiling. And I figured out I really couldn't progress. Some of these strokes that I was hearing these fabulous banjo players play, I just couldn't do because of the way I was holding my pick and the type of pick I was using. So a mentor of mine is this banjo player named Buddy Wachter, who's out of the Baltimore area, generally regarded as the best ever of that style, tenor and plectrum 4-string banjo style. But he told me he had observed that about my right hand and basically said, hey, you're going to have to relearn the way you hold your pick if you're going to break through that barrier. I said, oh great. Because you know how hard it is to relearn something. If you have muscle memory with something, it is really hard. And I was still very young at the time, but I've been playing that way for at least two full years and felt really comfortable. Now, the way I was holding my pick was kind of out here towards the edges. So my thumb and fingers were like that, and just kind of strumming, not really thinking about the mechanics of it. So the way Buddy described it to me, he's like, imagine, you're in your backyard and you have a 10-foot long pole, and on the end of that is a weight, and you're trying to swing that back and forth as fast and as controlled as you can. So, okay, so I'm thinking about that. And he goes, now imagine if you take the same weight, and it's still you, same motion, but you're just going to shorten the length of the pole by about, a third or even half. What do you think that's going to be, easier or harder? I said, well, easier, right? Because there's less slack, there's less distance between you and that weight. So what he's trying to, I'm sure most of you have guessed this already, but he's obviously, this is the weight, the pick, and then either your wrist or your arm is the pole. We'll just say for now your wrist. So by having this pick, this far away from your point of rotation, that's pretty far. You know, you don't have a whole lot of intimate control of that pick. There's a couple variables there, like your knuckles, fingers. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong. So he recommended, and it felt very weird at first. So if anybody wants to attempt this, just know it's going to feel very strange. But you take the pick and you basically hold it back where the center point of the pick is in line with this knuckle. So you have a lot of thumb hanging off the edge, right? It looks kind of like this. Now, some of you might already hold your pick that way. You know, there's a lot of people that do. You know, I'll be watching random people playing all skill levels, and some people just, for some reason, they kind of learn this way from day one, I guess. But what it's doing, so we've you know, decreased that distance now from here to here. So we knocked off, I don't know, 40%. I mean, not quite half, but we definitely knocked off a lot of that distance between the weight and the point of rotation. What that does is makes it much easier to control, and you're sort of simplifying now. You really only have a couple variables now. You have, there's not all these extra joints that are turning and rotating the pick. It's basically just a back and forth motion, up and down, like that. And the other thing I do is take my fingers and let them glide on a surface. So whether that's your pick guard on a flat top or a raised, elevated pick guard like this. Once again, don't have to do that. There's plenty of great players out there that keep their fingers curled up the whole time and free float. But just realize when you're doing that, now you've added this whole other variable, this up and down axis, if you will. And so by keeping our fingers gliding, now we're not you know, cementing them permanently on something. We're allowing them just barely glide, kind of float on top. That's eliminating that up and down axis now. So now we really just have to think about side to side. And when you're playing something really fast and you want to be in control, the less variables the better, right? So that's the whole point of why I do this. And you know, sometimes people see me play and they think it looks funny because my thumb's hanging way off. And but like I said, for about 6 weeks, maybe even more, maybe 3 months or so, it felt really awkward playing that way.
How do you hold it again? Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, sorry. So basically, and it doesn't matter the shape of the pick you use. Basically, the middle point of the pick will be in line vertically with your knuckle of your thumb.
Okay.
So it's very, and sometimes I go even farther back, like that. Yeah, exactly. Then these fingers kind of hang like that, real natural. It's like if you just take your arm and hold it out and let your wrist kind of fall with gravity. That's where your particular arm and wrist want to be with your anatomy, your weight, all that. So I try to not fight the body. Like if that's where it wants to be naturally, just take that and try to replicate it on your instrument. And that's where you're going to get the most natural kind of feel. So you're not forcing. You see some people play kind of like that, or maybe they'll play kind of like this. And all that, they've gotten used to it, but they're using a lot of extra muscles and things that they don't realize are probably getting in the way of them just making natural, easy music. So you might experiment with that a little bit. It's going to feel strange at first. It comes in handy for fast single note passages. So when you're playing really, really fast, if all you're having to think of is just this back and forth motion, that simplifies things a lot, as opposed to, okay, I'm thinking about, up and down, side to side, everything in between, Anyway, so that's something I always like to start off with because I get a lot of questions about how I hold my pick. The next question I get a lot is what kind of pick I use. We're all kind of gearheads naturally. When you play an instrument, you're always talking about strings and pick and, what brand of guitars and well, this one's going to sound better than, So, and it's fun, I don't deny that. But the pick type that I use for guitar is a lot different than I use for tenor banjo. Because for banjo, you have this loud instrument. It's already loud, plenty loud. So the type of pick I use for that is generally like a medium, kind of in that 70 points, mil kind of range, 70 to 80 in that range. It just makes it sound a little sweeter to me. If you use a heavy pick on banjo, you get a lot of this real loud, clanky, kind of clacky pick noise, especially in the recording studio. It's just all pick noise, and you spend all this time trying to EQ that out. On guitar, however, it's kind of the opposite. If you use a thin pick, in my opinion, you get this sort of weak, wimpy, sort of you're not moving enough air out of the instrument. And for a wooden-bodied instrument like this, you really need something pretty thick to push that out. You know. Do you have, Lindsay? Do you have like a medium pick or any regular, like just like a regular banjo pick? Yeah. So this, I just wanted to show. Yeah, perfect. So here's just a general difference in tone. I'm really going to try hard not to change the way I'm playing. I'm just going to just put the pick in my hand and hear the difference. So here's the medium. It's like a very typical Fender teardrop, which by the way I love for banjo. This is what I would use, maybe the bigger triangle shape, but I love this Fender. Their celluloid is a good material. Not all plastic is created equally, you know. All right, anyway, so let's listen to the difference. So here's the regular medium Fender pick. Okay, sounds fine, right? And then now here's the thicker pick. See if you notice anything. Just a little more, I think. I don't know. Y'all tell me.
Here's the soft one.
Okay.
Here's the soft one.
Okay. Here's the. So this will be even thinner, right? This will be like a
It's floppy.
60 mil. Okay. So the Fender's probably 75, somewhere in that range. So this is now. Listen. This should be even more. Kind of what's the word? Thin. You know, it's a thinner pick, so you get a thinner sound, but. Okay, now just for contrast, here's the big thick one again. Just a little bit bigger sound, you know? Yeah, right. Okay, thanks, yeah. Now the other thing that's fun to get into is not only the pick material, but the pick shape, and specifically the point that's striking the strings. Because that can make a drastic difference in your sound. So these have a pretty narrow point. This is your typical teardrop shape, right? The kind that I use, we'll use the orange one so you can really hopefully see the difference here. Yeah. Don't trust that. So I use a bigger rounded triangular shape so that the striking surface, there's more surface area striking the string. So you get a little bit of a fatter or bigger tone. So if you compare just the outlines here, let's see if you might be able to see this. There's quite a bit of extra material, you know, that I'm getting on the outside of my pick versus the typical teardrop shape. So you're getting with this, and the easiest way to demonstrate this is to take the same pick. We'll go back, this is your medium Fender pick. Once again, probably 75 millimeters. But listen to the difference. I'll play with the pointy side, which sometimes you want, by the way. I'm not saying, you know, you never want that. It tends to cut through a little better in certain mixes. I tend to play with a rounded, more like the sides of the Fender pick, you know. In fact, that's how I used to play with these, but I would never use them this way. I'd always use them on the side. So listen to the difference in sound. Now this is the same material, literally the same pick, but the only difference is going to be one is a narrower pointy end and one's a wider, fatter, rounded end. Okay, so we'll just play a scale. Okay, now I'm just going to flip it to the side. Here's back to the pointy, rounded. Noticeable difference. I mean, it really, it tamps down those high-end frequencies when you use them.
I can see that in a different situation you'd want to
You
use
want one or the other, yeah.
Unlike the fat pick, which
Kind of is
it seems like it's the way to go.
good for everything. Right, exactly. And even with those, I'll manipulate the shape of the, you know, they come with a pretty standard, fairly pointy shape, but sometimes I'll round that off with some real fine sandpaper or something, or even sometimes like a rug or carpet works well, and you just sort of burnish that edge off and you get a little more rounded tone. Just kind of depends what style you're going for. You know, if I'm playing more of a traditional 1920s style, oh good, Kristen's going to come. I wanted to demonstrate how to accompany instruments like a flute and things like that that are a little different, you know. Yeah, but Anyway, so all that to be, I don't want to talk too long on pick types, but it is something I get asked all the time, and in years past, I end up forgetting to talk about it, so I wanted to talk about it from the get-go today. Okay. So any other questions on pick materials or types, right hand, anything like that?
How about firmness of your grip?
Now that is probably the most important thing to talk about, okay? Seriously. So, how firm or how loose you're holding your pick directly equates with volume immediately. In fact, I think it's a big fallacy to think that your volume has to come from playing harder or playing, digging in more. And I'll demonstrate that. So I'll use my picks. This is the thick one. But I'll just do a basic, like a tremolo. Okay, so we use this a lot in mandolin playing and tenor banjo. Not as much on tenor guitar. So this is a medium volume. I'm just kind of holding my pick about medium grip. Now to increase the volume, all I'm going to do is squeeze my thumb and my index finger harder together. That's it. I'm not going to change anything about the motion of my right hand or the radius or whatever. So just listen to that. You'll hear the volume as I squeeze harder just crescendo quite a bit. So here's medium. Now I start squeezing. Loosen up, and now go very quiet. But I'm trying pretty hard. I mean, there might be a subtle difference in the way my hand looks just from squeezing harder, but it shouldn't look that drastic. It should really look about the same. When you want more volume, squeeze. Less volume, lighten up a little bit. And then if you really get close, the real test is, can you do a fast tremolo and play quiet? Because so often those things are connected. The faster we play, the louder we play. The slower we play, the softer we play. But you want to be able to do opposites like that. So to get more volume, just squeeze louder. Pretty interesting, huh? It doesn't take a whole lot of extra force or effort. And that, once again, if you're thinking in those terms, if you set yourself up well with a good pick, good right hand technique, and you understand the finer details of volume control and all that, you can play extremely efficiently and get a lot of results, out of not having to work very hard. So once again, that factors into me talking about injuries and stuff. Usually people I know that have, not always, but usually people I know that have had some sort of tendonitis, carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, any of that, generally will have some technique problems that maybe could have been fixed. I'm not saying it would have prevented it 100%, but generally I see a lot of that, and that's just how it is. But it's never too late to start to tweak your technique a little bit. So, yeah. Okay, any other questions about, we can move on from the pick, I guess, right? Cool. I want to briefly talk about the left hand before Kristen joins me on a couple tunes here. As important as the right hand is, the left hand is equally important. And I know this too from other instruments. Double bass, that was my main thing for a long time. You spend a lot of time getting your left hand technique correct and all that. But with fretted instruments, we need to focus on that as well. Just because we have frets, we can get kind of lazy because they're all right there. On double bass or cello or violin, your left hand has to be perfect because your intonation needs to be perfect. So for us, we get pretty lazy. Now, the way I think of the left hand fingers, I'm a big advocate of using your pinky finger as much as possible. For some reason, it gets kind of thrown to the wind in these fifths tunings. Maybe, I'm not sure why, but there's a lot of mandolin cross-pollination and fiddle and things like that where they tend to use, they use their pinky, but you see a lot more third finger dominant stuff. The problem with that is that we're playing on at least a 23-inch scale length, which, mandolin would be this long, or even less, right? And a violin, very short. So you can get away with that a lot on those smaller instruments. But when you're playing a true tenor guitar length, you're really going to be asking for trouble in your left hand, making all those stretches. So for me, the rule for efficient fingering is generally one finger per fret. And then if you need to get another 2 or 3 frets or whatever, just sort of do a little micro shift. Don't stretch as much. Shift the whole hand. And what that looks like from behind, the thumb is fairly well positioned in the middle. I'm not saying it needs to be right in the middle, but the more of this you're doing, the harder it's going to be to make those shifts. And of course, your reach naturally, if you're gripping it like this, you won't be able to reach as far. Try that. Take your hand and grip it like let the neck just kind of fall into that spot. Yeah, and try to stretch as far as you can. And it's a very awkward, your fingers flatten out to get anywhere, right? But if you take your thumb and put it in the back, now, you can...
2 more frets.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. So that right there will help you a lot, just to play more comfortably, more efficiently. The other thing that doesn't get talked about enough is how close to the frets your fingers need to be, because that's where a lot of your tone comes from. Left hand, not the right hand. As an instrument luthier, repairman and stuff too, I can't tell you how many times, definitely in the hundreds, people would come in with their instrument and think they needed a new fret job, or something. And then I'd pick it up and play it and go, man, sounds great to me. It feels, I wasn't trying to belittle them. I'm trying to figure out, you're thinking mechanically, and I'm going, there's nothing wrong, Then they would pick it up, and it would, it sounds like a sitar or something. Yeah. But a lot of the times, their fingers were just too far away from the frets. So when you practice, I'd encourage you to play maybe a simple scale, or even simple chords, or not simple, it can be as hard as you want, but you can do this with very easy, scales, and just practice letting your finger get right up to that fret. You actually want to feel the fret, but you don't want to encroach, on top of it, because once you go a little too far, you get a dead sound. So you back away just a little bit, and you get a nice, clear sound. If you go too far north, you'll get this. So now you can overcompensate by pressing down harder, which is what most people do, because they hear that sound and they think, oh, I'm not pressing down hard enough. Well, they end up with hand problems too later, because now they're stretching a lot, they're pressing down too hard. You got all this stuff you're fighting yourself. But this is even before we get into the music part. You're already working too hard. So try real hard, everything you play, to be right there next to the fret. And your sound in general is going to just be so much better. You're also going to find you don't have to press down as hard, like we were saying. So your endurance is going to be better. You can play longer and not get that, that cramp kind of feeling, right? So that's another reason, just to have good left-hand technique. Yeah, no problem. So we talked about, thumb. Oh, and then obviously, fingers curved. The strongest structure in architecture, I think, is an arch, right? So arches are strong. And the more we curve our fingers, with some exceptions, obviously if you're playing a bar chord, you're going to have to bar at times. But specifically for single note playing, try to keep your fingers as curved as possible, and thumb behind the neck, up close to the frets. If you can follow those 3 rules, you'll notice a big improvement in just your tone, as well as your endurance of the left hand. As well as, you'd be surprised how many neat voicings you can get, because now your hand, regardless of hand size, is now able to stretch a little more. I get a lot of these neat voicings. Look at this. That's a big stretch, but it's not. It's not, that looks crazy, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable, because my thumb is right behind the neck, a big open hand, trying to get close to the frets. Anyway, so left hand is important. I think it gets neglected a lot, because we spend a lot of time talking about the right hand and fancy strums and strokes and all that. Yeah.
So what do you do, to warm up in the morning if you've got a big show on? Is there a sort of stretch pattern exercise that you do to kind of get yourself ready?
So for me personally, and this is just me, so I don't do any of that, because I just dive right into the music, and I tend to get all that stuff worked out in the song,
Right.
But it's kind of like they used to sell, well, they probably still do, but those like grip masters, or like with the springs and all that you could practice. And I remember I was so proud, because I saved up my allowance and bought one, at Guitar Center, or Guitar Satan, I call it. But I bought one. I was all excited to show Mr. Buddy, my teacher at the time, and I was super young. And he goes, that's pretty cool, but aren't you gripping anyways on the neck, like for free? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I just kind of wasted $20, didn't I? He's like, well, maybe. Because that's a totally different motion too than this. This is, anyways. So I don't personally have a lot of warm-up exercises.
You don't feel like you need to stretch or anything?
Not really. I do try to kind of warm up with an easy medium tempo tune, usually, just to kind of get the blood flowing and my brain working and everything just kind of, but I don't have a whole lot of, I did enjoy Allison earlier. She had some neat tips for some little patterns you can do, like, you know, that kind of thing, and skipping strings. You know, that kind of stuff is great, going backwards. You know, those kind of things are really helpful, I think. Other things you can do is take random shapes that are, on tenor tuning, it's really nice because all of our chords are very symmetrical looking, you know, visually. We have a lot of chords that just look nice. So, but like this for my tuning would be like a G7 chord down here. What I'll do sometimes is take either the two inside fingers or the two outside fingers and just do the inverse back and forth. So do that for a while. It's not going to sound really good. It's more of just a random shape that helps you kind of break the muscle memory habit and lets your hand know that you're in control of it and it's not in control of you. You know, that's kind of the whole point, is your thoughts in all of this, whether you're improvising or whatever. Do you feel like you're in control? You know, so these are good exercises you can do. And then now the harder one for this shape is the two outside fingers. You know, to be able to do that quickly, and then the two inside and the two outside. So there's a lot of that stuff you can just make up on your own. Honestly, it doesn't have to be a chord at all. It can just be a random shape. Yeah. Now, before I get you up here, Kristen, I'm going to talk real quick about a couple right-hand strokes that I think are really neat that work well on tenor guitar specifically. Because as a banjo player, I found myself playing, and I'm tenor banjo, in a lot of these 1920s and 30s. You know, Yes Sir, That's My Baby, and 12th Street Rag, and Sweet Georgia Brown, and all those tunes. But I did get into playing a lot of more, I wouldn't call it, it's not super modern, but it's like Americana, folk, country stuff with some friends of mine back in San Antonio. And I had to, it's tough to get your head out of for me, because I came from tenor banjo, it's tough to separate that because the tuning's the same. So you want to go back to the, go back to that stuff sometimes because it's like autopilot, right? But I'm like, no, I have to play this like what I'd want to hear on a good recording. You know, just nice, supportive kind of background stuff. And then when you take a solo, you really want it to sound like a nice melodic guitar solo, like you'd hear, even though it's a tenor guitar, you still want to sound as much like what people are used to hearing. At least that was my philosophy. And then inevitably, you get done with the first set of the gig, and all these people come up to you and they want to talk about your guitar because it's got 4 strings, you know. And so to me, it's really neat being a tenor guitar player. We had this opportunity to communicate to people in a different way because we play this kind of rare instrument, you know. So one of these strokes that I do a lot, I learned it or made it up because I accidentally took a bluegrass gig when I was a kid. They said they needed a banjo player. I thought, oh, great, you know, I wasn't even thinking, you know, I'm 13 or whatever. Had my mom drop me off the gig. And I get there and I quickly realize, oh no, this is a bluegrass gig. And I was like, I saw the F mandolin and the upright bass and all this. And I thought, uh-oh, and I've got a tenor banjo. And they assumed that I played bluegrass 5-string banjo. So I kind of made it through the gig, but I was so mad, embarrassed. You know, I was really frustrated. So I vowed when I got home, I was like, I'm gonna figure out a way to make this sound like a 5-string banjo with a single pick. So I came up with this little. I'll play it for you first, real quick. Imagine on a banjo, you get more of the banjo sound, obviously, but this is a type of cross picking, we call it. So you take one pick, and you turn it into a roll, essentially, okay? But the left-hand voicing is equally important because you want these open kind of drone strings to give that 5-string effect, okay? So. So it's just a sweet kind of roll thing you can do. And you can get it pretty fast. I mean, it's probably about as fast as I can. So that's about as fast as you could do that. The next one that I've kind of had to learn was what happens when they play much faster than that. Because in bluegrass, they do. They play very fast, you know. So I'd be stuck with that. and I couldn't go past that. So then at that point, I'm basically just doubling what the mandolin is doing, and that's not very helpful because it's not filling that roll that a 5-string banjo normally has, right? So the other way, and this one is a little, it's not perfect, but it works. You need 2 strings, and I'll explain that other roll here in a second. But this one is down on the 2nd string, whatever your tuning is. So down, down again on the 1st string, and then up on the 1st string again. So be down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. Kind of like triplets or a triplet, triple. Yeah, good. Right? So when you speed that up, then you get these open strings, and you basically pick, I don't know, like for me in my tuning, I'll be at a G up here. Okay, so a G at the 10th fret. And you're going to leave one string open, so be, and the open string doesn't even need to be in the chord, really. I mean, it just needs maybe diatonically in the scale, but it's there for an effect, just to give you that open drone 5-string thing, right? So when you speed it up, let's take like a G blues that's really fast. Okay, here's how I do that. So so it's like that's, but at least it gives you that kind of roll, right? So that one to me, I don't use very often, but I was bound and determined when I got home from that gig that I was going to have something. So that took me a few months to really figure out. Now the other roll that's and I'll do this with Kristen here in a second. I use this a lot, backing her up. And she'll usually be playing a sweet melody on the flute, right? I'm doing the chords. Sometimes you want something different besides just strumming, you know. And without anybody else there, you still need something to be constant to kind of fill in that space. So if I immediately start to just tremolo things in the background, we lose that sense of time, you know. So that first pattern that I'm about to demonstrate with her is you need 3 strings for this one. So you start on your 3rd string. So for me, that's a G. So I'm C, G, D, A. You do that one as a downstroke. So down. Then you're going to skip over to your 1st string and do up. So down, up. Then the next 2 are downs. Down, down. So be down on the 3rd string, up on the 1st string, down on the 2nd string, down on the 3rd again. Now the reason I do that, instead of down, up, up, like some people do, they'll do like a slip stroke. To me though, that was too easy for me to just sort of lazily do all ups. I want it to be really precise like a 5-string banjo player. So the whole point of that next downstroke, to be down, up, down, down, is to put that alternate picking in there so it does limit how fast you can play it. And the pattern is like a bluegrass roll, you know, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Yeah. So you're basically imitating what you do with your fingers naturally. Do you mind coming up and we'll play something? I'll show you kind of how I'd use that maybe in context. Yeah, you want to do like You Are My Sunshine maybe? Sure. C. It's my lovely wife Kristen, for those that have not met her, Kristen Jackson. I almost called her Crystal there for a second. Josh called her Crystal the other day on the trolley ride. I thought, oh yeah, kind of fits. Nice, thank you. Yeah, we'll do one more here in a second. So that little roll was just a nice diversion from the strumming. You know, it was just a different sound. And it kind of added this little lilty. I was swinging it a little bit too there. You know, that's the other thing. When you're at a slow tempo like that, you want it to feel almost like there's a little bit of that lilt in there. The faster you go, though, you can't do that. It needs to be very precise. So maybe we'll do one a little faster this time. Do you think of something that would be good? Maybe, let's see. Sorry. Tuning. Yeah, maybe, let's see. It's been a while since we've done a lot of these tunes. Can you think of one from the album you like to do? Doesn't need to be the whole thing.
Clarinet polka.
Yeah, okay. We'll just give this a shot. It's been a while. So.
It's been a while.
For me. What key were you? Let's see. B flat. It's the only time perfect pitch ever comes in handy. When people want to know the name of the key. All right, here we go. Ready? Same thing again. Oh yeah, good enough. Yeah, right. Yeah. So once again, that's about as fast as that can go. You know.
Let me ask you a
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
The final two downstrokes,
Yes.
which string?
So that would be down, up, down, up, and the final two are the second and third string.
Second
So
and the
yeah.
third.
So it's really the only upstroke we have is on that first string.
Now you're counting from
yeah.
your first string.
Yeah, the one
string.
closest to the ground is the first string. So 3 is down, 1 is up, and then down, down.
So it's 2 and 3.
Right, and then you have to finish
Both
that in
both
8.
as downstrokes.
Right.
Good old Bill Monroe fashion.
Yeah, exactly. That is very much like this. Thanks. Yeah.
And you're saying it helps you slow down?
Yeah, it helps you keep it so you don't rush that. Right, right.
Mashing it all together.
Very similar to this stroke. This is a what we call a broken chord stroke that comes out of the 4-string banjo tradition. And this is a real fun one to get under your fingers.
So that last one works good with finger picking.
Yes, it's very. That kind of thing. Throwing these little slides and stuff to make it sound a little bit more banjo-y, you know. But this one is something I really like a lot. You take, and you need a series of chords in the left hand to make this work really well. But it's real popular in plectrum banjo playing, and guys like Perry Bechtel and Harry Reeser. Django Reinhardt used it a lot too. All the gypsy jazz guys use this a lot. But so maybe I'll take like 3 F chords, like an F down here. For G tuning it'd be C chords, but whatever. So I do this. Okay. Then I'm going to take this stroke. Then between those, you can grab an extra note. Maybe like that. You can implement this stroke and it sounds really neat. You might cut away. So that's a really fun stroke. That's up on the A string, or the first string. So up, then all downs, down, down, down. So you jump to the third string, and it's a down. Second string, down. First string, down. So up, down, down, down. Up, down, down, down. Up, down, down. Right. And your first stroke is actually the up stroke on the first string. Up, down, down. Up, down, down, down. Up, down. So that's another fun stroke that if you can get that down just a little bit, anytime you throw that into a solo or something, you get people turning their heads going, what was that? Because it's something you don't hear a lot, on guitars. You heard it on 20 style banjo playing, but now there's not many people doing that anymore. So you really don't feel like a lot of these right hand strokes are sort of a lost art because there's not many people keeping them alive these days. Any questions on that stuff? Because I know we're looking at our clock here.
Right behind you.
Yeah. So we're about done, but real quick things that to me will make your playing better at any level. Always get that metronome out and play with the metronome. If it feels uncomfortable, you probably need to use it more. That's always the rule, right? So record yourself. I don't know how many of you were at Allison's thing this morning, but a couple of things she said really resonated with me, and they're things I've been telling people for years but didn't know the neuroscience behind it. But when you record yourself, I'm always trying to tell people to put pressure on themselves. Replicate that environment where you feel nervous, if you do, but if you feel nervous in front of people, playing in front of people, and you really don't have the means to get out there and just play in front of physical people more, something about having an iPhone or whatever on you, recording you, puts a lot of that, it feels like a set of eyes are on you, and it puts some of that same pressure. It's really good at replicating that feeling. So if you're doing that weekly all the time, where you're recording yourself a lot, if you go out and jam with people, you'll instantly feel much more relaxed. I'm not saying you'll play perfectly, but when you mess up, you won't freak out as much, because usually the problem isn't what you play well, it's what you play not so well. And that's where we have these train wrecks, right? You'll be playing along, everything's fine, you make one mistake or wrong note, it kind of flusters you and derails you for the whole thing, right? So you almost want to practice messing up. And that's something a lot of us don't do because we're so focused on making sure everything is sounding good linearly. But we want to think about, all right, we know we're going to make a mistake. It's not a matter of if, it's just when and how many. But keep going. And can you get back on that train if it's gotten off the tracks, So practicing, a good way to do that, by the way, is look up a bunch of YouTube videos or recordings. Find one that's in the key you like, the song you like, press play, and just force yourself not to hit stop or pause whenever you make that mistake. I see that a lot as a teacher. They'll be playing through a song, they might get through maybe 30 seconds, a minute, make a big mistake, and then stop the song and start over, as if you have to always go from the beginning, like it's this linear thing, but it's not. Music is, you're constantly adjusting. It's a real, organic thing, constantly kind of playing off of mistakes and stuff. So that's another thing that I saw so much progress on my students when they really, it's one thing to know this stuff, but to implement it is the hard part, to actually be doing this on a weekly basis. And I'm not even saying every day, I'm just saying once a week, kind of branch out of your comfort zone a little bit. Record yourself playing with the metronome. So, because a lot of times you don't know how far you're getting off when it's just you. You almost need that external recording to show yourself what it sounded like, Play, getting better by ear. Another thing that's really good to do is that YouTube thing I was talking about earlier. Maybe pick a song that you're already remotely familiar with the sound of the song, but purposefully don't choose a key that's comfortable. Just hit play and see how long it takes you to kind of figure out the key. I don't think enough people give themselves that opportunity. They're either reading out of a book, which is fine, by the way. I love books and everything, but you're kind of a slave to them. You have to have them to play. That's when you want to. If you're noticing that all the time, where you really need your tablet or books, you might want to practice playing by ear more. And simple songs. You don't want to start off with anything too hard. 3 chords at the most, probably, like "You Are My Sunshine" or those kind of songs. Purposefully put them in strange keys that you're not used to, just so you can start developing that sense of relaxation. You want to be relaxed with all this stuff. And once again, that's kind of the opposite of what happens. Normally, whenever we play stuff we're unfamiliar with, we get more tense, and then it just snowballs, and then it just does not go well. You usually stop playing and wait for the next song and hope it's one you know. But my challenge to you is purposely put yourself in those situations where you don't know the song at all, and just try to jump in. If you figure out one chord, that's a win, you know. Try it again. Maybe you'll figure out another chord. Maybe eventually you'll figure out all the chords. But once again, just replicating that environment of kind of nervousness and tension. If you're familiar with the way you perform in that environment a lot, when you do it out in public, it really isn't a big deal anymore. And you start to see those situations like a big jam. Has anybody ever been in this situation where you're in maybe a big circle, like a jam, and somebody calls a tune and maybe half the room knows it, but you don't, the other half doesn't? Usually you just sit back, maybe kind of noodle a little bit, but you wait for the song to pass, you know, until then hopefully it's like, well, now it's my turn, I can pick a song I know, you know, and I just encourage you, and that's fine, I know that feeling, but when people are playing a song they don't know, maybe quietly, instead of just noodling randomly, try to actually figure out what's going on. Be surprised how often you'll get a lot right. Cool. You know? Yeah. Well, I know we started very late too because the other class rolled over, but we don't have a whole lot of time now. I love to answer questions. It could be about anything. I mean, instrument stuff, string gauges, actual playing, scales, pieces, whatever. Does anybody have?
I had a question.
Yeah.
So, when you showed me the shapes last year, like
Yeah.
you know, there's a 2,
Yeah, minor 7, 2, 5.
yeah, there's 2, you know, then you've got what is it? Sorry.
Yeah, nice.
Where are we? So 2. That's the 1. See, now I'm in show, and all of a sudden my nerves just.
That's
go,
okay. That's good. This is a good example. Thank you for being brave here. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my 2.
Okay,
And
right.
then there's my G.
Yes. Right.
So if I'm looking at this is tuned in fifth, so you've got
Right.
this interesting relationships. Everything's a fifth,
Right. Which is nice.
and you just got that. So what's the funnest kind of songs to play on a tenor? Because tenor's tuned in fifths. What was the tenor thing built for?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that the tuning, real quick, the tuning was invented not to play chords. So it was actually invented to play single note stuff well, because you had all these immigrants coming over, mainly from Italy, that were brilliant mandolinists, and the banjo was all the rage by the teens and 20s, so the demand was for a fifth tune instrument that they could quickly sight read music on, but it didn't take long to where the banjo became the rhythm instrument of the orchestra, and everybody was playing chords on it as well. Even though the plectrum tuning is much more suited for chords. So, long-winded answer. It's not even really designed to play chords yet. There are some great chords in the fifth tuning. It actually sounds really nice.
Yeah, is it a better chord guitar?
You know, it's funny. It's I believe truly like the types of chords you can get on it sound just as deep and full. You just kind of have to know the right voicings. But to answer your question, if you wanted like a really good, honestly, blues tend to work really well.
1, 4, 5?
'Cause you can just stay, 1, 4, 5 stuff. You can kind of stay in the same little box stuff. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. One thing we talked about a lot last year. We run into seventh chords a lot, like a dominant seventh chord. So I don't know, G7. Okay, let's just say G7, right? And from a theory point of view, if you want to spice up your playing, a quick little trick you could do. One easy trick to get is you count 5 notes away from the root of the chord, and you make that a minor 7, and that will always work in tandem with the dominant 7 you're currently on. So, for example, a G7, if I count 5 away, so G, A, B, C, D. If I make that a minor 7, that will work. They share the same notes of the scale. They're the same exact key signature and everything. So a G7, or here, I can also play. See, it just adds that extra, and we call that in jazz a 2-5 pattern. Because in this case, the minor 7 that works with the 5 is a D minor. The G7 is a G7, so that's the 5 in the key of C. So it's like a 2-5-1. We're just not mentioning the 1. If you ever hear somebody talk about, I'll play a 2-5 there, that's kind of what they're talking about. And really, more specifically, they're saying play the minor 7 chord that's a 5th away from that 7th, just to give you something more to work with. That also helps a lot when you're getting into improvising. You feel like you hit a wall with so many licks and ideas you know on a G7 chord. So then you start thinking about, well, what do I know in D minor? D minor 7. And even though they're the same notes and scales, you always approach it from a whole different thing. Yes?
What's your key for making a minor seventh? Are you dropping the seventh half a step? Is the same thing for making minor minor?
It's a good question. So you have the minor, as you probably know, you're flatting the third just to make it minor. And then a minor 7 is a flatted seventh. So you're lowering the seventh a half step.
Got it.
Yeah. So you'd want a flatted third and a flatted seventh. So yeah.
So you're making it rainy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you were talking earlier about one finger per. So I started off on mandolin.
Right.
So I'm a little bit more used to using.
Kind of stretch it
Stretching out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But so if you could just show me how would you finger just a major scale?
Yeah. So closed position or open. We'll start with open. So a scale, typically would be open, 1, 3, 4. So right there, my fingers are still one finger per fret. Now where it gets a little different is when you're in closed position, right? That's probably what you're asking. So there, what you're doing is stretching just a little bit. You're kind of doing 4 fingers per 5 frets here, but then a true shift for this. Right, so you do.
4.
And the way I like to do this is I make my little micro shift here. So 1, 2, then 4, 4. So it look like this. Another shift back. Shift. So there are these 2 little micro shifts you make. So you're never actually truly stretching. Maybe a hair, but that's a lot better than doing like that.
So the strain comes in, I think, after time.
Yeah, a lot. So a fast major scale would be. So it's all very contained, but I'm trying to do these little shifts, just a little bit. And that helps me not get fatigued. It also keeps me close to the frets. So when you're stretching, you're going to tend to, not quite get there. But if you get that little shift in, like a classical musician thing, you'll get a lot closer to that fret. Yeah. And by the way, real quick, this is just another thought I had. I get asked about modes a lot. People they want to know about modes and Mixolydian and Lydian and Dorian and Aeolian and all that, Super Locrian and all this stuff. To me, this is just a real quick thing that might help you if you're struggling with that. I never really liked the way most theory books and pedagogy teach modes. They tend to always teach it from a piano point of view. Usually, the key is C. C to C is an Ionian mode. D to D is Dorian. E to E is Phrygian. And all that makes sense academically, but it does not help you in the real world, where you just need to implement these quickly to learn how to improvise better solos. The way I think of modes is strictly just by what's being altered in the scale from its major counterpart. So, for example, and this might be common sense to you guys, but some people, it's a pretty big revelation. Mixolydian mode, for example. So all that is a fancy name for a scale you play over a dominant 7th chord. So it's just a major scale with a flatted 7th instead of the natural 7th. So that's a real quick way to think of Mixolydian. Just play what you normally play, except don't forget there's a flatted 7th. And then for Dorian, I think, that's just a major scale, but we have a flatted 3rd and a flatted 7th. And no matter where you are, in any key, so you don't have to think too much about the piano key to keys and all that. Anyways, that's just a quick thing that seemed to help. It seems to help a lot of people. Just they overcomplicate the modes. Modes are really, in my mind, should be an easy way to explain what you're allowed, what notes you're kind of allowed to play under a certain or over a certain chord. So don't let that get you too confused. It's really just learning what are the alterations you're making to the normal major scale. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Anything else? I know
What would be the natural minor?
So natural minor is where it's like the Aeolian mode. So you have the flatted 6th and flatted 7th. The Dorian, right? Good question. Good question. The Dorian keeps the natural 6th.
Okay.
And so here's the difference in sound, right? So for people that are wondering, here's a C minor chord. Either of these will work, by the way, on C minor. So the Dorian just has the flatted 3rd and the flatted 7th. Here's what that sounds like. Aeolian, or natural minor, has the flatted 6th, here, in addition to the flatted 3rd and 7th. So it sounds like this. That one note. Instead of... That's Dorian, here's Aeolian. Okay. And then you got the other modes like, well, you got melodic minor and harmonic and all that kind of stuff too. So
You got the relative minor.
Right.
So like if you look at Autumn Leaves or something.
they started very late,
they're
so
changing,
yeah.
Yeah,
I guess I'm the one that gets the short
Sorry,
end.
yeah.
No, that's okay.
But
Yeah.
just like in some songs they change key centers to like a relative minor.
Yeah.
And then that's how they're structured. So
Right.
is that a technique of composition, I guess?
It is, and it also does help you in chords as well. Like you can use relative minor substitutions for major chords sometimes. So sometimes if you're on a C major chord and you want a little different sound, but something that's not going to conflict, play A minor, because that's its relative minor. Or even if you're not playing from a chord point of view, if you're just improvising and trying to have different scales to draw from, maybe you've exhausted the C scale ideas. Start playing A minor scale ideas, even though they're technically the same notes starting in different places.
Just starting in different
It
places.
just makes you
Yeah,
think a lot
that's right.
differently.
You can run the C scale just starting on D.
Right.
Right.
All right. I think we should wrap up here. I keep getting the stink eye.
Guitar teacher once taught me that, instead of, like in jazzy stuff, instead of playing the major chord, play the 6th.
Right. That's it. The relative minor. Yeah, the 6th.
Oh, okay.
That's it. So you already got that lesson. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And just real
I
quick.
just didn't know what it's called.
The relative minor is the 6th away from any major. So yeah, that helps, right? Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.